Hey guys, Ty here. Hey, I'm doing decided to do some book reviews on some different books that I'm reading. One as a way to help me better understand and better apply the concepts in them, but also as a way of giving back to you guys and hopefully teach you some concepts you may not be aware of and make you aware of some really good books that might help you in your business or sales performance or even whatever daily life. This first book I've chosen to review is a book I've had for a while. I actually studied it as part of my associate's degree at Salt Lake Community College, and it's called Spin Selling. And I read about half of it when I was going to school, and then kind of stopped, as I tend to do, being ADD. But this book, I found it to be a lot of value. So with these reviews, I'm going to do a chapter at a time so that I can cover a bit more than if I just decided to up and do one huge video on covering the whole book. So with this first one, normally I'm going to do, like I said, just one chapter at a time, but I'm going to cover the preface, go over what the book's about, and then we'll get into chapter 1. So, without further ado, what is SPIN? SPIN stands for Situation, Problem, Implication, Need, Payoff, and it's a questioning sequence which is found to be effective in large dollar sales compared to traditionally taught sales methods. Now, the book was actually written in 1988 after the author Neil Rackham, his company, he owns consulting, it's like a data and analytics firm, Huthwaite Corporation, and hopefully I'm saying that correctly. They conducted a 12-year, $1 million research study in which they studied effective sales performance, and they analyzed over 35,000 sales calls. In conducting that study, they found that traditional sales methods, which were taught and were actually developed for small sales, many people assumed that it was just applied to all sales across the board, but they found in these that those techniques didn't translate to the same success in the larger sales. So they tested this theory for over 7 years before they introduced it to the public. During that time, they also taught several thousand people in the methods that they had discovered, and they found that those that they taught increased their sales averages as much as 17% more than the control groups taught under the traditional methods. So just a couple of quick key points from the preface chapter. In the 1920s, these traditional sales models were developed based on the studies of E.K. Strong, who I believe was a Stanford professor, and you can correct me if I'm wrong there, but he did studies in the field of small sales and introduced ideas such as features and benefits, closing techniques, objection handling methods, and open and close questions. These concepts have been copied, adapted, and refined with the assumption that they should work for all sales. And like I said, these studies found that that's not necessarily true. And like I put here, however, many of the things that help you and the tactics that help you in small sales actually hurt large sales performance. So let's get into chapter 1. So chapter 1 is on sales behavior and sales success. So success in the larger sale. The study that Spin Sells is based on, and again, it was actually over, I put 10 year, but it's actually over a 12-year period, and analyzed over 35,000 sales calls. They studied over 116 individual factors that they felt might play some part in sales performance. They researched effective selling in 27 different countries, and the initial intent was to show that traditional sales methods actually worked and had a positive impact on sales success. But as Neil puts in the book, he says, research has an inconvenient way of coming up with evidence that we wish we'd never found. Now, he actually talks about in the first chapter that he got fired by a couple of different firms that were spending millions in promoting the traditional sales methods in their sales training, and they found that they weren't getting the numbers they wanted, so they brought him in to help justify what they were teaching, and he found that he kept finding over and over again that that these methods that they were teaching weren't having the success, and he actually got fired from a few different studies until he had enough evidence to back up, and then that ended up being the spin selling book and theory. So Just a quick note, a small sale is described throughout the text as a sale which can normally be completed in a single call and which involves a low dollar value. Most writers have incorrectly made the assumption that what works for a small sale will automatically work for a large one. This book was written for those to improve their success in large sales. So let's get into the traditional sales model. The traditional sales model, and I have it highlighted here, focuses on probing, uncovering needs, overcoming and managing objections, and closing a deal. As the amount of involved with the sales grows larger, the less effective these methods become. So this is the traditional sales model. Open the call. Find ways to relate to the buyer's personal interest and make an initial benefit statement relating to your product. Number 2, investigate needs. Find the customer needs by asking open and closed questions. Number 3, give the benefits of your product or service. Once you've uncovered those needs, give the benefits of your product to show the customer how the features of your product or service can be used or will help that customer. Number 4, objection handling. Use traditional objection handling techniques such as clarifying the objection, rewording it in a way you can meet. Number 5, closing techniques. Close the sale using traditional closes, and we'll get into those more in Chapter 2 as far as what those are. But each of these steps was found to be successful in small sales, but were found to have very little success or even be detrimental to success in large sales. It was found that successful salespeople focus on objection prevention rather than objection handling. Closing techniques that are found to be successful in small sales were actually found to cause a loss in sales on larger sales. So, length of sales cycle. While a low-dollar sale can often be completed in one call or transaction, a major sale may require numerous calls or visits spread out over a period of time. Multi-call sales have a completely different psychology than single-call sales. So in the single-call sale, the buying decision is usually made with the seller present. However, in the multi-call sale or transaction, it's often made when the seller isn't present in the duration between visits or calls. Now, a seller with a brilliant sales pitch is likely to do well in a single call sale simply based on the excellence of their pitch. But what they found was when they conducted a small study on an office products company, they found that less than half of the key points covered by the sellers in their sales pitch or presentation were remembered by the customer a week later. And even worse, they found that the customers who said they were likely to buy directly after the sales pitch had lost most of their enthusiasm for the product within a week. Now, while a good product pitch has a temporary effect on a customer, after a few days that feeling is largely gone. If you can get the customer to make a decision on the spot, as is often the case with a small sale, there's no reason you shouldn't use a temporary effect of a product pitch to raise customer enthusiasm and help close or get the business immediately. However, if you can't get an instant decision, which is often the case in large sales, the customer will have forgotten most of it you said and will have lost any enthusiasm you may have had for your product. So you want to focus on how you make them feel, just as a side note, and we'll get into that with each chapter. Now, Huthwaite also found that the traditional sales model outlined above is dangerously unsuccessful in large sales. And if that example of this, again, like I said, how you make people feel. So an example of this is the pushy car sales that many of us, or car salesmen, that many of us have experienced or know someone who has experienced. Who pushes hard for the car sale when they're just not ready to make a decision. Leaves you with a negative feeling and becomes something that you'd like to avoid at all costs. The rule seems to be that it's okay to be pushy if you can get an order then and there, but once you and your customer part ways with an order, your pushiness has actually reduced your chance of taking an order. Because your customer doesn't even want to talk to you again, you may never discover what you did wrong in the first place. It also hurts with repeat business. Now, size of a customer's commitment. Almost by definition, large purchases involve bigger decisions from the customer, which alters the psychology of the sale. Now, this is especially important. In a small sale, the customer is less conscious of value. As the size of the sale increases, successful salespeople place an emphasis on increasing the perceived value of their product or services. This is especially important in high-ticket sales where you're selling something for a high value and you have to drive that up. So the building of perceived value is probably the most important selling skill in larger sales. And again, the higher the dollar on the sales, the more important that becomes. So the ongoing relationship. Most large sales involve an ongoing relationship with the customer. This is because most large sales require some form of post-sale support. That means that the buyer or seller must meet one or more times after the sale, whereas the smaller sale is often a one-off event where the buyer will never see the seller again. Those selling major goods or services usually generate most of their business from, sorry, I got a quick typo here, usually generate most of their businesses from an existing pipeline. Now, in small sales, it's relatively easy to separate the seller from the product. As a sale grows larger, the seller and product become much harder to separate, or even inseparable in some cases. The customer puts more emphasis on the salesperson as a factor in their decision. They may like the product you are selling, but if you haven't taken the time to establish a relationship with the customer, it's very likely they may still turn down your offer for business. Neil talks about in this chapter as well. He had a guy, he needed a projector for his office, and so he called this company to have a guy come out and give him a presentation. He said the guy was an absolute cheeseball, but he needed a projector. He'd done his research and the price was okay, so he agreed to buy it even before the guy was finished, just to get him out of his office. Now then, in that same day or same week, he had another person come and pitch him on it was a complex accounting software that was going to be integrated into all of his business. And he said that the person was very professional. In fact, they seemed to have more product knowledge than the guy who did the projector presentation. However, he didn't take the time to really understand and get to know Neil, and so he just wasn't comfortable. Because it was a decision where, for one, everybody in his company would see it, but also because there was an ongoing relationship involved with the purchase. He didn't feel comfortable purchasing it from that person simply because that they didn't take enough time to develop that relationship with them, and he didn't want to enter a business relationship. He didn't feel comfortable at that time entering a business relationship with that person because they didn't take the time to set that up initially, following what he outlines under the spin model. Again, we'll get into that in just a little bit. So, the risk of mistake. In small sales, the customer can afford to take more risk because the consequences of mistakes are relatively small. The easier the purchase is to hide from those around us, the easier it is to justify. As the purchase and decision cycle grows larger, customers become more cautious of what others around them will think of the decision. For example, if you buy the wrong car, you can't put it on a shelf where your wife won't notice it. Larger decisions are more public, and a bad decision is much more visible. Purchase price is one factor that increases caution, but fear of making a public mistake is actually even more important. Let's move on. Okay, the 4 stages of a sales call. So he said that no matter what size of call, even though there's differences between what's successful in large sales and what's successful in small sales, he says no matter what, every sales call or transaction goes through these 4 distinct stages. So number 1, preliminaries. This is the warm-up before the actual selling begins. This includes introducing yourself and beginning the conversation. Many people believe that during the first 2 minutes, the customer forms a crucial opinion of whether or not they're going to buy. However, in their studies, Huthwaite found that the preliminaries have less influence on large sales than originally thought. Step 2, investigating. Almost every sale involves finding something by asking questions. You may be uncovering needs or getting a better understanding of your customer and their organization. Finding something out from the customer that will enable you to sell more effectively. Success in large sales depends on more than anything else on how the investigation stage is handled. Case studies found that the average person in major account selling can increase their overall sales volume by more than 20% simply by developing improved investigation skills. Huthwaite actually found that there were a lot more questions asked in successful calls, resulting in advances in orders, than in those that were unsuccessful. And again, those are investigation questions. Step 3 is demonstrating capability, showing the customer that you have a solution that it makes a worthwhile contribution to solving their problems. This can be done through a formal presentation, showing your product in person, or by describing some of the benefits that you can provide. No matter how you do it, you must convince your customer that you've got something to offer that will solve their problem. The methods used in smaller sales become less effective as the size of the sale increases. Now, obtaining commitment. A successful sales call will end with some form of commitment from the customer. In small sales, this is usually in the form of a purchase, but in large sales, there may be a whole range of other commitments you must obtain before reaching the order stage. Your objective may be to get a customer to agree to attend a product demonstration, to test a new material, or to give you access to a higher level of decision maker. In none of these cases is commitment in order. Now, larger sales contain as I outlined above, contain a number of intermediate steps called advances. Each step advances the customer's commitment toward the final decision. In this area, the classic closing techniques taught are ineffective and may even hurt your chances of success. So, again, if you're trying to pressure them into making a decision right now, and it's a multi-step sale, it's likely to backfire because you've made them uncomfortable and they don't feel comfortable moving forward with you. Now, the importance of each step will vary within the type of sale. The exact balance will depend on the type of transaction, its purpose, and where it comes in the sales cycle. Despite the differences, most transactions do include all 4 stages, even if some are very brief, and that's going to vary by the customer and the situation. So, questions and success. Questions persuade more powerfully than any other form of human behavior. This is not just in selling. Studies in negotiation, management interactions, performance interviews, and group discussions have all come up with the same basic fact. There's a clear statistical association between the use of questions and the success of the interaction. The more you ask questions, the more successful the interaction is likely to be. And some types of questions are more powerful than others. Now, in selling, it's been standard practice to distinguish between 2 types of questions, open and closed. So let's look at what is a closed question. These can be answered with a single word, often a yes or no. Some examples of this would be, do you make the purchasing decisions for your company, or is your business more than 5 years old? Closed questions are sometimes referred to as directed probes. Now, open questions. These require a longer answer. Examples of this would be, could you tell me something about your business, or why is that important to you? Open questions are sometimes referred to as non-directed probes. Now back to E.K. Strong. These aren't open and closed questions aren't a new concept. E.K. Strong was writing about these in around 1925, and some evidence shows that the distinction goes back before then. Most sales writers have adopted the distinction and have generally made the following points. So this is how they feel. Based on E.K. Strong's writings and the traditional sales assumptions. So open questions are more powerful than closed questions because they get the customer talking and often reveal unexpected information. Closed questions are less powerful but are useful with certain customer types, such as the garrulous buyer who won't stop talking. Even though closed questions are less powerful, you may be forced to use them use them in certain transactions, such as when very little time is available. Open questions are particularly important to success in large sales, although closed questions can be successful if the sale is small. A general goal of sales training should be to help people ask more open questions. So contrary to these previous theories, these theories are developed under the traditional sales model. Huthwaite found that, and they were shocked to find in their studies, that there's no measurable relationship between the use of open questions and sales success. In one manufacturing company, they analyzed 120 calls and found that calls which were high in closed questions were just as likely to lead to orders and advances. Another study of a tech company found no difference. They did another study of a tech company that found no difference in the mix of open and closed questions between the top and average performers. Some of the best salespeople didn't even ask open questions, and none of Huthwaite's studies found evidence to support the classic distinction between open and closed questions in high-value sales calls. So, to wrap up, this is a new direction, and this is the introduction of spin. It was from analyzing the top performers in these studies that Huthwaite began to recognize the successful questioning sequence behind spin selling. In summary, the spin sequence of the questions is as follows. Situation questions. At the start of the transaction, successful salespeople tend to ask data-gathering questions about facts and background. Typical questions include, how long have you had your current equipment? Or could you tell me more about your company's growth plans? Although situation questions have an important fact-finding role, successful salespeople don't overuse them because they can bore or even irritate the customer. Number 2. Problem questions. Once sufficient information has been gathered about the buyer's situation, successful people tend to move to problem questions. For example, is this operation difficult for you to perform? Or are you worried about the quality you get from your old machine? These questions explore problems, difficulties, and dissatisfactions in an area where the seller's product can help. Inexperienced people often don't ask enough of these problem questions. Number 3, implication questions. Implication questions take a customer problem and explore its effects or consequences. Doing so helps the customer to understand a problem's seriousness or urgency. In smaller sales, sellers can often get away with can often find great success by simply asking good situation and problem questions. However, successful implication questions are critical to large sales success. Typical examples include, how will this problem affect your future profitability? Or what effect does this reject rate have on your customer satisfaction? Implication questions are complex and sophisticated, and even many experienced salespeople don't ask them well. Need payoff questions. Need payoff questions get the customer to tell you the benefits that your solution could offer. Typical examples include, would it be useful to speed this operation by 10%? Or if another typo right there. If we could improve the quality of this operation, how would that help you? Need payoff questions have a high correlation with sales success. Huthwaite's studies found that top performers ask more than 10 times as many need payoff questions per call as do average performers. Now, keep in mind these questions are not asked in a rigid sequence. For example, top salespeople don't ask all of their situation questions before moving on to problem questions. However, it would generally be true that situation questions are mostly asked early in the call and other questions broadly follow in the spin sequence. So that's chapter 1 as well as the preface chapter for spin selling. If you have any questions, feel free to comment below and I'll be happy to answer them. Now, chapter 2 will get more into closing techniques and we'll keep moving forward. Thanks for watching.